All right, is that going through?
Yep.
Okay. So Dad, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, I was looking for a slide. Okay, I'm, as Pam said, as Stephanie said, excuse me, I'm Bob Gale, ecologist and public lands director with the nonprofit Mountain True. We work to try to restore and protect and restore the natural communities in the mountain counties of North Carolina, but we also work on human communities and our rivers. And we have quite a program on that. Feel free to go to our website, mountaintrue.org, if you want to know more about that. I have a bachelor's science degree in basically geology and biology. They didn't have environmental science degrees then, but I took all of the sciences, and that is now called an environmental science degree. I also worked in wetland science for several years and became sort of a specialist in wetlands and coastal wetlands and bog habitats. And I also worked in the coastal, Piedmont, and mountain forests in forest ecology. So currently I am a forest ecologist and have been in my present job at Mountain True since 1998. So long time, 22 years. And I'll pass this on to Pam.
Hi, I am Pam Grangerdale. I graduated from Limestone College with a BA in art education, high school all the way down to elementary school. I'm a retired National Board certified elementary art teacher, and I held many positions at different schools in North and South Carolina for 25 years. I also ran 2 different art studios, like Stephanie said, and I am a professional marbler of paper and fabric. And if you've noticed, any trend in my history, there's no science in my history, no science classes. So I have learned a lot over this 35 plus year journey.
All right, and again, my name is Ashby Gale. I am the paleontologist for my own business, Charleston Fossil Adventures. So after I worked at the state park, I started this business to lead family-friendly outings down here. So if you have kids as young as 4, grandmas as old as 104, you can come on these trips and find and keep your very own fossils. And my business is unique in that it partners very closely with area museums so that fossils that are scientifically significant get donated to those museums, and some of them are first species occurrences for the entire Atlantic seaboard. Prior to my business, of course, I did get a degree in environmental science up at Appalachian State University, which the Ashevilleans are very familiar with, and then did make my way down to the coast again after growing up there to start working back at the state park, where I did curate their fossil collection and tripled it in my tenure at the park and set it up so that it would be a sustaining collection that people could come and visit and see on display with mostly citizen donated finds. So again, we are the authors of A Beachcomber's Guide to Fossils, but back when we started this, we did create a social media account. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Fossils ABG, of course, standing for A Beachcomber's Guide. And so we're very active on Instagram and Facebook, not as much on Twitter, but we do get some new science news up there every now and then. So if you're on these platforms, we do encourage you to go over and give us a like or a follow because we do share some pretty cool stuff and give you updates on the projects that we're working on and where we're at. So with that, we're going to get into how this whole project started way back in 2014 and how it landed here into the book that hopefully some of you have with you. The image on screen right now is one of the first fossil trips that I basically had since being a really, really young child. So this was December 2013. We took a trip along the Carolina coast, and that's what our dining room table always looks like on any of these weeks that we go out fossil collecting. There's going to be towels full of sorted fossils. Now, we went down and we collected fossils for a week, and we took all those back up to Asheville, and we're sitting in our dining room, and the table looks like this, and got the fireplace going because it's nice and snowy outside, and we're trying to sort my parents' collection. And we've got their display cases open, and we're trying to sort through it all. And in this photo, if you look closely, there's a folded pamphlet in the middle of the table. And that is an old staple bound black and white pamphlet that my parents used from the beginning to sort their finds. And it worked, but it had limitations, and things were black and white. They might have been kind of fuzzy. They were at weird angles. You just couldn't, it was a great starting guide. It wasn't as scientifically done as perhaps they had needed at this point in 2013. And so they're complaining over it, and they're saying, oh, I think I have this. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's that. I think it's this. Well, I don't even know what it is. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening to them talk about all this. And I'm also a photographer in addition to a scientist. And I'm looking at all their fossils, and they have almost everything that's in this little pamphlet. And I say, well, shoot, why don't you guys write a book? I can do the photography. Dad can do writing about the different animals. And Mom, you're an artist. You can do the illustrations. And we can bring something to the 21st century that is desperately needed in full color, and make it our own, and make it something that people really want. And so the very next day, I started taking photos. We started doing things, and some of those photos are still ones that are in the final product, which is pretty incredible to think that 7 years later, that photo still made it through.
So we started conducting weekly meetings. We looked at this as a business, and we said, well, we have to be organized in our approach. So we met weekly around the dining room table again. So this time, instead of fossils being on the table, we were discussing what things we needed in our book. It was an idea way back then. We talked about the sections that we needed. We talked about what kinds of fossils we wanted to have in there. We brainstormed ideas of Pleistocene era animals that Dad could write some stories about, and then likewise would be the animals that I could draw pictures of. So we did that. We set out weekly goals for each of us to accomplish, and then when we met the next week, we would go over and say whether or not we accomplished those goals or not, and whether they need to go to the next week's meeting. And then, like you heard, Ashby got a job down at the coast of South Carolina, and so he left Asheville, and so we had to start meeting by Skype. Who remembers that? Way back when Zoom wasn't a big thing, there was this thing called Skype. So we met via Skype beginning in March of 2014, and we lovingly called those meetings Skype Sundays. And so those were very necessary because each one of us had our own different jobs that we were involved with. And the meetings that we had were our prod for excitement and to, make sure that we were on the right path to get a book published.
So we went through these meetings for about a year and a half, year and 3/4. And over that time, most of the 99% of the photos were taken. All of the species highlights were written, and item descriptions, all of the fun facts on the pages, all the illustrations. The bulk of the manuscript was completed within 2 years. And so we had, as you see here, the gray binder and the red binder. Those are printouts of the layout that I'd assembled at the time, and we each had our own notes on what was going on, whether there were typos, maybe we needed to rephrase something. And so all three of us individually read through every single page of the book, all 544, and said, okay, we had all of our edits. And so I'm on the coast, they're in the mountains. So we met halfway in Colombia, and for an entire weekend, Friday afternoon, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, really past dinner, we sat down and we compiled all of our edits into those binders, into one binder that I took back and edited everything on all of the individual Microsoft Word files that I had for the layout of this book. So it was a huge undertaking. We just locked ourselves in the hotel room. My mom brought food for us. We got coffees to go, and we were hermits for that weekend, and we pushed through and we did it. Another big thing at the time was we had to decide where we stood on the side of science with the megalodon lineage, and we have a section on that in the book on our reasoning for which hypothesis we've supported. So this image here is showing kind of the different ancestors of megalodon that led up to him, and that was one of the big discussions that we had that weekend as well. So I'll pass it off to Dad now.
So then we had our publisher search. We were all ready, and we started looking around. And the thing about our book is that we had some new ideas. We've seen lots of field guides that have been around for decades. We wanted something that was very user-friendly, but also something with and for the average beachcomber, not the techie scientists like Ashby and I might be on one part of our hat we're wearing. But something for the everyday person. But we also wanted it to have high credibility in science. And at the same time, we wanted to space some stories about these incredible creatures throughout the book, rather than just pages of IDs all the way through and that's it. Something to break it up and make it a little more interesting. And then also, we wanted informative and fun things put in there. And engaging photos and illustrations. So we went to this first publisher, and we thought we'd found them right away. They liked our concept, they said, and we signed a contract almost immediately. We were really excited, but then we found that they didn't really get what we wanted or didn't like our ideas after all, and they started going in a different direction, they wanted, rather than color illustrations, they wanted to pull off black and white line drawings from the web. And these are line drawings that have been used over and over, even in some of their books, and they've done a few little fossil books. And some of these line drawings dated back to the 1930s and 50s. And we felt like overall that they had one foot stuck in the 20th century, and we learned later on that they had the other foot stuck out the retirement door, because they soon sold the business. But we realized we were going the wrong way with them, so we actually pulled out of the contract. And we went and found another possible publisher, and that one had produced a number of field guides in animals and nature. But they said, the editor loved our book, but the rest of the organization said, no, there's no market for fossil field guides. So they didn't accept us, and we weren't that happy. And the third one we went to actually thought our book should be a children's book. So finally, we ended up, we found fantastic publisher in the University of Georgia Press. And they have been absolutely fantastic. They understood our idea. They liked it. The editor liked it. The staff liked it. They peer reviewed it with their scientists. They liked it. And they ended up having a very collaborative process and very communicative throughout the whole process. So that's where we ended up. Fourth time was a charm. And that's how we finally got to this point.
All right, so now we'll get to the book in its finished form. We'll show you some highlights from the pages. Again, if you don't have it, Malaprops is providing you the links in the description below for where to buy it with them. So in general, we have a pretty decent introductory section that has many different chapters on things like how to find shark teeth, how and where to find shark teeth, different beaches and what their profiles look like and where the fossils are going to be, a geologic overview of the Earth, the processes of fossilization, a lot of different things that will really bring you up to speed on the background of the things that you're going to be finding on the beach. We also have, like we've mentioned, 12 different species highlights of different animals interspersed throughout the book, and we'll talk about those further. The big heart chunk of the book is over 325 pages of 325 plus fossils. Each page has an individual fossil, and these are what we really, the main volume of the book is. And then also at the end, we have your standard text glossary that's very thorough, but also easy to understand. And then we also threw in something that's a little less common. We threw in an illustrated glossary. And so some of these different features that you might see on a tooth or on a bone, or something how a bone or tooth fossilizes, is just better being illustrated. And so there are photos, there's arrows indicating different things on the bones and the teeth. So that illustrated glossary is there to help you as well, with cross-reference page numbers to take you back to things so that you can look and compare and see, okay, I see what's going on there, and now I see it here on this fossil. So with that, we'll get into the geologic history.
Okay, being that I started out majoring in geology, I guess this was kind of a pet idea of mine. I felt like it was important for folks to know the background of the earth-shaping dynamics and climate that actually led to the habitats and supported the prehistoric creatures whose fossils we get to see today. So this section talks about the shifting continents, how mountains were built and eroded down, how oceans opened and closed, how land bridges formed between continents, and the migration patterns that allowed for prehistoric animals. And featured, as you can see here, this is a very nice illustration by Pam on the Earth and the core and the convection currents that cause continents to drift and move around.
And Dad, it's up to you again.
I'm on still. I'm a little slow tonight. The process of fossilization, that's something else that people don't really understand. It's very, there's a very low chance that anything becomes fossilized, but because there have been so many millions of years, it's happened a lot. So we find a lot of them. But there's several processes that cause it to happen. So this section talks about the three major processes of permineralization, replacement, and petrification. Plus, it also talks about some similar conditions that form fossils or fossil-like or preserved animals that we can use to learn about the past today. So it's a pretty good section on explaining that.
Okay, so now the beach, we all love the beach, or I haven't met a single person that doesn't love the beach, but this section, Fossils in the Beach Profile, it discusses in a clear and concise manner how you can go out and find fossils on the beach and how they are deposited there. We all know that there are the tides come in twice a day, so there's two chances for new material to be distributed onto the beach. So generally speaking, the larger items are dropped off at the high tide line, and the smaller items are dropped off at the low tide line. And this is just a thumb rule general statement to get you going, because don't be fooled, you can find anything anywhere along the beach. And you need to keep in mind that you need to look for dark black shiny things. So size, shape, and pattern become your friends when walking the beach. Keep a little visual glossary going in your head and scan ahead of where you're walking when you're walking on the beach. And so you're going to be scanning for shapes. Triangle shapes generally relate to shark teeth. Circle shapes generally relate to vertebra. Long linear shapes generally relate to bones, big limb bones. So, if you find any of those that are dark and shiny, pick them up. But don't be fooled by some oddball shape that you can't put a name to, because I have any number of times picked up something and taken it to Ashby, and he said, "Oh, Mom, that's a rare vertebra from a frog." I was like, "Oh, wow." So, and then here is a very pro tip for you, is if you see a small, dark, shiny thing poking out of sand, stop and uncover it. And you never know what you might see or how big that something is.
All right, so here are, again, if some of you don't have the book, we are providing you with a glimpse into some of the identification pages. And this is a very standard format that every single page is going to have about 3 to 4 photos. Some of them, like a particular vertebra of a snake, we put in 6 photos because it's just so unique from every single angle, just that you're able to see. At the beginning of each identification section, here on the left, you can see the osteoderms, or the bony armor that's on the outside of some animals. That section, at the beginning of each of them, we have these introductory pages that show how the specimens are measured. So you can see that at the top left of that one page, the different lines corresponding to our measurements right there, which are then on the call-out panels on the left and right sides of the identification pages. We also have these supplementary images and terms. So, within the osteoderms, we're going to talk about scute lines a lot. So it's important for you to be acquainted with that. So if anything is called out underneath that, chances are it's going to be referenced to quite frequently within that section. So again, the ID page it's usually just one fossil specimen that's presented in different views. And in the little circle right next to it, like this top left image of the taper molar, the O stands for occlusal. And again, all of these different anatomical markers are listed in the illustrated glossary, and we have a horse showing you where something like proximal or distal or lateral or medial, where these are in relation to the original animal's body. So you get a better sense for how you're looking at this fossil right here. We have the identification of what it is with the scientific name as specific as we can be. If we couldn't get it down to the genus and species level, then we might have stopped at family, we might have stopped at order. The darker panel on the right here in the middle page, you can see we have our different kind of key things about that fossil. So its size in both standard and metric. And if you don't have a ruler, don't worry. Every single book comes with a metric and a standard ruler on the inside of the back cover. So you can always measure a fossil. This book is also 9 inches tall. So if you find a 7.5-inch long megalodon tooth, don't worry, you can measure it with the book. We also have the geologic age of the specimens that are listed, main identifiers, and then also down at the very bottom, we have our graphic on the density. Now, this is a qualitative measure, so we're not giving you a number. It's not taper molars are always 1.3. We're not trying to do that. We're just saying, hey, relatively speaking, that taper tooth is going to be heavier than a bone or denser than a bone. So we have it lightest in the lighter color, and darkest color, of course, means the densest or the heaviest. which brings us to the last feature at the bottom of the identification page. Mom?
I wrote all the did you knows and
research.
And researched them, yes. And just remember, I have no science background in my training. I'm an artist who loves science. So I wanted to approach the did you knows from a layman's point of view because I needed something that I could relate to when I was learning all about this. So I found different ways to write the did you knows in fun little ways, like what do a sturgeon and a vacuum cleaner have in common? Or, and the award for the best performance by a supporting bone in the leg goes to, roll. Oh, I'm not going to answer that, but you'll have to get the book and find that did you know.
And then the last page I have up here on this slide, you can see isn't a fossil. And that's something else that we incorporated into this guide. You can get a lot of books out there that show you what you're looking for, what they are, but not very many of them show you what they aren't. So we have this section called the lookalikes section, and it highlights pseudofossils. So objects that you find that will trick even professionals into picking them up. And then upon further scrutiny, you realize, oh, nope, this is just like this one, an iron nail, or it's a really oddly shaped rock. So we do have that lookalike section incorporated into the guide. So if you don't find something in the identification pages, give a look to the lookalike section at the end because you might have something that is in there.
So that brings us to the other sort of unique feature of this book, our species highlights. And that's something that I had a lot of fun researching and writing myself. And basically what it does is, this isn't usually found in field guides, but by spacing these stories throughout, for those of you that are out hunting fossils during the day and you go through your fossils and you've done everything and you're like, oh, okay, I'll put these aside for now. And maybe you're wanting to relax over a glass of wine or something later on, and you want to know a little bit more about some particular creature that you've been looking at a fossil of. So these stories talk about those creatures, and they follow their evolutionary path, sometimes from the first time they showed up on Earth, and they follow where these animals evolved, how they evolved, and what new species came from them, and the ones that we have today who are their descendants. And so it's very informative, but interesting for those who like a little more background reading. And so that's that. We hope I actually was given this assignment by my wonderful co-authors, and I hope you'll enjoy reading them.
And as you know, I have an art background, so here's my art. I'm thrilled that I'm a part of this book through my illustrations. It was my job to draw some of these animals that lived during the Pleistocene epoch. And so my formal artistic training did not include realistic drawings of animals or anything in a realistic nature. My training was more for drawing from myself and interpreting things. So my drawing style evolved just like the fossils did during this book project. And so I became more skilled in drawing in a realistic manner, finding the details for scientific accuracy of the animals that are included in this book. I have one of my original sloth drawings here that I would like to show you. This is Nothrotheriops. And this was drawn late in our book assembly process. And so on this one, while you can tell that it is a realistic style drawing, I really got to have some fun with it. And I pulled in my interpretive art skills to create the fur on the sloth. With pencils and an eraser, I drew energetically and erased energetically to create the texture you see here. It also shows how they walk on their ankles. So I'm really kind of proud of this guy. And then Ashby took this drawing. This is just one drawing of many that he assembled into the life scale. And there's a 6-foot man in the middle of those animals. He's very, very tiny. And so you can see how really large sloths during the Pleistocene epoch were.
All right. And then towards the back of the book, again, talking about those glossaries. So on the right, you can see just a standard text glossary. But again, we have tried to make this as user-friendly and as readable as possible, easy to understand. And then over here on the right, or on the left, is a page from the illustrated glossary. So you can see this one has things that are encased in the original matrix or the rock where they were fossilized. We tried to fit some things in the illustrated glossary that maybe didn't have a place within the bulk of the identification pages. So things like these shark teeth that have deformities, it's not really something you're going to see a lot, but we did want to include it in the guide. Or things that have closer detail, like the peccary tusk down at the bottom, showing those 2 different beveled edges. So basically, different things are going to be found in the illustrated glossary. It's definitely worth looking through as much as the identification pages are, though. So I really do encourage you to take a look through that section. All right, so now we're going to be minimizing the PowerPoint here in a little bit to show you some fossils in virtual, not exactly in person, but this is a little sampling from what you might find on our Instagram account. If any of you are tuning in from our Instagram account, maybe drop a comment saying hi. And we've got some about 60 to about 60 million year old fossils here from the Paleocene epoch. So just our take for the day of some of our favorite finds on the left, and then a really unusual shark called Paraorthocotus clarkii. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have a common name. That is his scientific name, but he is the end member of a lineage. So there is no relative of that shark alive today, which is just really crazy to think about, that was the last member of that entire lineage of sharks. So I'm going to stop the sharing here and we'll go back to split video, and I'll let Dad start it off with his favorite fossils.
Okay, Pam told you about the beach profile and how you sometimes find big things at the upper part of the beach. Well, the 2 of us were walking along the dune, the primary dune, and it was covered with tons and tons of oyster shells. It's always hard to find stuff when there's tons of stuff there, but your eyes learn to pick things out. Well, I saw and just riveted my eyes on, and a split second later, Pam saw it, and I reached down and grabbed it, much to her chagrin. This is sort of one of those finds of a lifetime. I'll try to hold it up so you can see it well. This, let me get it back, there we go. This is a claw core from one of those giant ground sloths we talked about. It's missing a little bit here. This would have been a sharper tip, the end of his claw. And this is the claw core. That is the bone that underlies the keratinous, or fingernail covering, so to speak. And you can see where it articulated with the rest of the leg, toes. And they, as Pam said, they couldn't retract their claws, so they had to walk basically kind of on their wrists like that. But these creatures are so big. The biggest species, actually, Erametherium, is about 2.5 times the size of a buffalo in weight. And they could stand up on their hind limbs and eat tree limbs. That's how incredible these creatures were. So that was just a hugely exciting find.
And the funny thing about that find is that This was Christmas Eve that when he found it, and the night before we were all hanging out in the cabin where they were staying, and we had joked. I don't know why we found this joke or why we came upon it, but we said, "Hey, you know, it would be funny if you go out there and you find a giant ground sloth claw core tomorrow or this week." And we'll always joke about the best, most ridiculous thing we could find during a trip. And so I guess that was just it for that week. Well, I had to work the next day, Christmas Eve, and I was over at the aquarium cutting up shrimp to feed all the fish. And my dad sends me a text, and it comes through. It says in all caps, "Giant ground sloth claw." And I'm like, okay, haha, very funny. Yes, we joked about that. And so I didn't pick up my phone. I get another message and it's a photo, and I couldn't see a preview. I pull up the photo, and sure enough, lo and behold, here's this 5.5 inch long claw core in the middle of his hand, just on the beach. Is just absolutely incredible. So keep your eye out for that one. That one is in the book, so you can see photos of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the other one I'll show you was another find of a lifetime. There are places on the beach where the beach used to be the seashore, the shore, and there was forest there or shrubs growing and grasses, and that got eroded away and covered up by sand for many decades even. And then it got eroded out again, and you would see the stubs from those old plants, trees, and shrubs sticking up, and they had turned black through time due to the anaerobic atmosphere they were in. And if you grab them, you couldn't pull them out. They were rooted pretty deeply, but they're rubbery. They just bend like rubber. And I was walking among that, and I decided to go a little closer to the shoreline, and I saw another stub sticking up, and I said, well, there's another one of those. And I was going to walk away, but I just sort of kicked it with my toe a little bit. I had sandals on, so I didn't kick it too hard, but it didn't bend. It was solid as a rock. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that? So I pushed on it, and this was what I saw sticking up. And I pushed on it, and when I turned it over, this was what I found. This is a big Mastodon Molar. And it was just so incredible to find that. You can even see the lighter color on the masticating, the chewing surface here is the enamel. And this one's worn down because it should have points sticking up, 3 of them along here, but it's worn totally flat due to the various things that animal chewed. So you never know, as Pam said.
Remember,
Yep.
dig up. Well, I don't want to say dig, but uncover what might be peeping out of sand, because look at what he found. Something that big.
And it is heavy.
Yes, it's very, very heavy. You know it's a fossil. Okay, well, I have some of my favorite finds to share with you. Everybody loves a shark tooth. And this perhaps is one of my best shark teeth. It's a great white shark. And the story behind this is, you know, aside from it being one of my very favorites, it also has a very unique story in that we had walked a really long way one time when Ashby was down there with us and he was working. And one of his jobs was to keep an eye on the sea turtle nest. And it was in the summer. And he said, oh, such and such a nest is about ready to boil, which means the little turtles were going to hatch. So we'd walked a long way out. I found this at like the very end of the time when we had said, well, we need to turn around. It's starting to get dark. So I found this. And our family tradition is to hide one of our best finds. So I stuck this little puppy, as I'll call it, in my pocket and walked back. And then we got to the nest, and the nest was ready. The little baby turtles were ready to bolt. So we stayed there well into the night. I mean, it was pitch black. Our eyes had gotten used to the darkness, but we saw these baby turtles, reminding you that nature continues its journey no matter what all is going on. And they made the mad dash to the ocean, and it was such a historic time. And so I associate that with this great white shark too that I have. The next, I have another good shark tooth, and this one is a tiger shark. And we have adopted this for all of our social media post logo. And we really like this because part of its scientific name is Gallia cerdo, which is part of our name. So that's another reason why we have adopted that as our logo. And then finally, I have, this is perhaps my best find early on when Bob and I were doing fossils, was this bison molar. It's a lower M3, and that's a positional designation for this molar. And again, when you see something like this on the beach, you know it's something different. You know it's not a seashell, and you are going to pick it up. And then that's when you need the good book to figure out exactly what it is. So I'm proud of that.
And I'll throw out that, as she said, we like to hide our best finds and then show them to each other at the end of the day as our last thing we show each other. But back then, whenever Pam and I found something, we were starting out. When we found it, we screamed at the top of our lungs when we found something cool.
All right, and then I've got some fossils here. I'm in the process of moving, so most of my things are actually packed up, but I was able to pull a couple out. And first one here is one of the biggest complete bones that I've ever collected on a beach. And this one is a section of a rib bone. It's the entire rib bone from something like a bison or maybe a small ground sloth. And when I say small ground sloth, they're still 8 feet tall, but they're not 20 feet long like Aramithyrium. But this one's just really beautifully preserved. You have a lot of great detail on the articular surface, and then where it's kind of worn away at the end, you can almost see the growth lines from the epiphysis, which is that cap on the end of the bone that facilitates bone growth from being a juvenile to a biological adult. So that's a really nice one. And then the other one I have isn't from the beach, but I'm sharing it because it is an animal that is near and dear to my heart. It's actually it's the fossil that was in the photo of my biography photo. But this is a section of a Colombian mammoth tooth. So really large teeth. The complete tooth would have been about the size of a large shoe, or maybe about 1.5 times the size of a football. They're really, really big teeth. You've got the chewing surface right there, very barely chewed or worn down. But what makes this fossil unique and special in South Carolina is that it is actually our state fossil. And even larger than that is this was the first vertebrate fossil discovered in North America. The first fossil was actually a scallop shell, but for most of us who like animals with bones, first vertebrate fossil was the Colombian mammoth. The other unique thing about this animal is that this wasn't a woolly mammoth. It wasn't covered in fur. And while this animal was around in the Ice Age, in most of the southern United States, sure, it was about 17 degrees Fahrenheit cooler in the summer and 32 cooler in the winter than modern temperatures. But we didn't really have the glaciers down here in South Carolina, at least, that you see up in Ohio or out in Montana. So they didn't need as much fur to protect them and keep them warm. So it looked a lot like a modern elephant, and the teeth are very similar. All right, and I'm going to jump back to the presentation here. All right, so for those of you, again, that came in late, we do have social media accounts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Fossils ABG. Of course, ABG standing for A Beachcomber's Guide. And there's that tiger shark tooth, the one that my mom just held up. That is the silhouette of that very same tiger shark tooth. So that is kind of the story behind our logo right there. We've never revealed that prior to tonight. So go give us a follow on those platforms. We're very active on Instagram. All of that content is shared to Facebook, and we'll get onto Twitter occasionally. So give us a follow if you haven't already. Hopefully some of you have tuned in, and we will see some of you virtually on the replay of this for those of you on the other side of the world. And with that, we want to say a huge thank you for tuning in, and we have time for questions.
Okay, thank you so much to the Gales. I'll say over in the chat, we have a lot of compliments about just how cool your story is, and also just a lot of wows about the fossils. And wows for me as well. That was just super cool. And how great is it that the book includes a ruler?
Right?
Right? Like perfect and thoughtful. Yeah, absolutely. Ashby, do you want to stop the screen sharing now, and then people will just be able to see y'all better as you're answering questions? And speaking of which, I'm actually going to ask, because your videos are sort of small when the slides are up, Pam, your drawing that you showed earlier, can you show that, hold that up again, and we'll be able to, yeah, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, I couldn't judge either.
Yeah, and that's just because the video is kind of small there. I'm gonna pop back out, so yeah, that was just very cool, and I just wanted to make sure that people could really see that. That's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we had a question where someone asked if you could talk a little bit more about the density chart that you use in the book. Could you explain more about that?
Yeah, sure. So again, we do include kind of more description within the how to use this book section. But yes, it's basically qualitative. The way that you would say, oh, that the green on my wall is yellower than a dark forest green, but it's greener than yellow. That's kind of the example of our density. It says, okay, this mammoth tooth is really heavy. It feels very dense. There's more scientific ways to talk about density, of course, but most people will just say something that dense feels heavy, whereas this rib bone feels very light. And so what we did is we kind of broke down the density into 5 different categories, where it's extremely light to extremely dense and everything in between. And we use a little shark tooth to indicate whether something is more light or more dense. So generally speaking, most of the shark teeth in the guide, we say are some of the most dense things you find because it's a form of enamel. And so same for most teeth. Whereas most of the bones that are in the guide are going to be up on the extremely light end. And then other things kind of fall in between. So I hope that answers the question.
And we might want to throw in that, you also find on the beach bones from recently dead animals, but they're all clean and they look very, incredible, but you pick it up and they are super light. So these fossils you find, whether they're denser or lighter, feel more like stone. They're heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that answers the question. And if not, I bet that our audience member, they know how to get in touch with you now on social media, and they, can follow up. And I've learned a lot just listening to you, and from the little bit I've been able to see the book. I do want to, and I say that, and I'm working from home, and so I don't have as much actual contact with all of the books as I used to. So, and I do want to mention actually something that we, just as an aside, something that came up before we started, which is that we did have the happy problem of selling out in the store, but we are getting more books in, and we'll get those books out as soon as we can. So I just want to throw that out there. So if when you order from us, you'll get a message. We have people who actually process those orders. It's not just like an automated system, like an actual person will get to the order and email you back and let you know that, that we're getting books in from the warehouse. And so, and with the pandemic, I feel it's necessary to just say that everything just takes longer. Supply chains and shipping and all of that stuff. And so we are very grateful for everyone's patience. It's everything's just very different, and we're all grateful for everyone's patience.
And
so
one thing that, you talk about being delayed by the pandemic, the book was supposed to come out November 1st.
Right.
Delayed a month and a half, and it didn't come out until the 15th of December. And then we as a family didn't receive our copies until Christmas Eve.
Well, nice Christmas present anyway, if you're celebrating Christmas. Yeah. But yeah, it's just kind of how, we just all have to, exercise some patience and grace around everything right now. So yeah, we're always appreciative. And yes, I remember we started talking about this, via email months back, and, all the ETAs kind of changed. So we're happy that it's happened. And I think this will be a great book for folks when you can and do, get back out to the beach, when weather allows, when being out is, is feasible. Certainly if it's anytime soon, make sure you're still practicing social distancing, but just amazing to know that you might be sort of tripping over some of these remarkable pieces of prehistory, right there under your feet. So cool. So I have one question for you, and I'm going to check back here on the audience questions as well and see if we have any more. But I wanted to ask that I wanted to know when. So obviously this is all in the family, right? But you're a mix of scientists and artists. But Ashby, how old were you when you knew that you were going to follow on this path? And was it kind of like your dad, and if it's too personal, don't tell me, but was it more of like, your dad was like, oh, steering you that way, or more like your dad was like, definitely do something different, and you were like, no, Yeah. So yeah, tell us about that.
So my favorite way of telling it is from like 3 or 4, I had that standard childhood fascination with dinosaurs that, most every kid goes through. You see the chart online of when parents become experts in dinosaurs is when they're a kid, and then it drops off, and then when they have a kid, they become experts, and then it drops. So I was that typical child saying, I really like dinosaurs. And I'd go with my mom to the bookstore on Hilton Head, and they had this little purple book on dinosaurs. I don't know what dinosaurs it was about or who wrote it, but all I knew at 3 years old is the spine of that book was purple. It was on the bottom shelf, and it was about dinosaurs. I would check that out every time I was there. And it was kind of always this thing. I'm very much I'm going to do that, and then I see it through. And so I said I wanted to be a paleontologist, and gosh darn it, I'm going to become a paleontologist. And I got my degree in environmental science, and that's something I say in my lectures a lot, is that you don't see very many paleontologists with a diploma that says paleontology. Most of them have environmental science or geology or one of the biological sciences. So that's kind of the route that I took, but it was no real pressure from my parents, really. It's just always been personal fascination.
We did buy him because he wanted to be a paleontologist. We bought him, I think we got it from a local store here, a little box of hard, kind of like synthetic plastic rubber or something with a little hammer and little goggles and everything. And he got to chip away in there and dig up planted bones that were in there. And he took it to heart, and he spent a lot of time chipping away at that.
And I have one story also, and it's from third grade, where he made, I'm sure it was a school project, he made a television, paper television. It had a scrolling script. And in this, Ashby says he wants to walk along and dig up a long bone and then build a museum. So he's well on his way to building a paleontological museum as well.
Well, that's amazing. I just and we had some of these comments as well. The fact that this is a family project that you've undertaken, that you've completed, and that this is something that you've shared is just wonderful, and a lovely inspiration for other families, or just groups of people, families in whatever form they take. Just a nice piece of inspiration for people who are already super science oriented and those who aren't. That's the other thing. Like, we can all be engaged in this. We don't have to be scientists to be interested in science, and to engage in this way, and to have a greater appreciation for the natural world, and to have all of that kind of dovetail, where we can look at the past, and it can help us to appreciate the present, and to behave in a way that will help safeguard the future as well, right? So thank you so much for that.
I think that's a really unique thing about beach fossils, in that these aren't things that are behind a barbed wire fence or private property, or all of these fossils are ex situ, meaning they're taken out of the place where they originally fossilized. So in speaking of terms of layers of the earth, unfortunately, they don't carry as much scientific value for research, because we don't know exactly what layer they came from unless they have some rock attached to them. But the great thing about beach paleontology is that it is so accessible to members of the public. Anyone can go out on the beach and pick something up and find something that could be 3 million, 30 million years old. So that is really cool.
It's very cool. Yeah. So we're just after 7 o'clock. So we'll wrap up. And we spoke earlier about if you had any book recommendations, and my colleague Patricia, who has been on the chat the whole time, she's been posting the links and staying on top of that. And we thank you, Patricia. Actually went ahead and posted the links for a couple of the books that we talked about earlier, including Fossil Vertebrates of Florida, Ashby, which you recommended and is part of the further reading list in the book. Yep. Which is another cool, in addition to the ruler, you've got the further reading list, and then everything else in the book as well. But and then also Bob had suggested Back of Beyond, the Horace Kephart story, which came out just recently. So if you are particularly interested in Appalachian history and natural history, and this area, definitely recommend that. And Pam was saying that she had just read Lady on the Hill about the Biltmore estate. And it's fascinating. A lot of people are aware that the Biltmore estate is a thing, but you know, there's all sorts of stuff to know. So thank you for sharing that with us. We encourage folks to check those out. And so I will say thank you again to everyone who's come, and especially thank you to Bob, Pam, and Ashby Gale. And then I also want to offer you all, the Gales, the last word for us this evening before we sign off.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I'm so glad that Malaprops can offer something virtual for us during this time. We love to talk about fossils, and we were delighted to come and do this. So thanks again to Stephanie and Patricia.
And I'll just say that I hope that I've been amazed at how many people in the mountains actually really love the beach, and I guess it's vice versa. And so for those of you that actually do spend time at the beach, I hope you got a new hobby maybe, and this excites you and gives you something else to do among the many things you do when you go to the shore.
And yeah, I'd also like to say thank you to Malaprops. This is our first virtual event hosted by someone else since the book release. And so that's kind of really exciting. It's a milestone in the book publication process. Each day, I'm always taken aback by either seeing someone send a photo of their copy of the book to me, or just seeing someone post and using very similar wording from the book. Is really exciting to hear people really embracing the knowledge in it. And one thing that I realized we completely failed to mention in the presentation is that the book covers beaches from Texas to Florida, all the way up to New Jersey. So you can take it on vacation to all of these Gulf and Atlantic beaches, and it should cover something that you find there. Maybe not everything, but we did try and make it as comprehensive as we could without making it 700 pages long.
The Gulf and Atlantic coastal plains were all once grazing habitat for some of these big creatures. So it's pretty interesting. Then they got flooded.
Well, that's so even more amazing stuff right at the end. Yeah. Yeah, I just keep saying that's really cool over and over again, which doesn't sound so smart, but it just happens to be true. That's super cool. So thank you for just being a delightful family. And for sharing some wonderful, fascinating stuff with us, and including your journey in this project again, which has just been amazing. Thank you for that. And we do encourage folks to stay in touch with you on social media, to also stay in touch with us, and to join us for other events. And with that, we'll say goodnight, and thank you again so much to everyone. Please stay safe and stay well, and we look forward to seeing you again. All right. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.